Good evening. My name is Minister Johnny Banks Sr. I'm the Executive Director of A Knock at Midnight. Knock at Midnight is located at 400 West 76th Street in Suite 206. We can be reached at 773-488-2960. I want to just put up front for you one of the programs that we're working with Boots on the Ground, Students in the Seats, which is our truancy initiative. And in our truancy initiative, what we really do is work to get young people who are not going to school regularly, who are struggling with attendance, who are struggling with some of the issues that's wrapped around not only going to school but staying in school. That age group between 16 and 21, 22 years old, because no matter how old you are, no matter what you're struggling with, everyone needs to get an education. And so at A Knock at Midnight, we're working with several schools with their Boots on the Ground initiative, which is an intense truancy reduction initiative where we are out in the streets, we're pounding the pavement, where we're working with people, we're working with families, we're providing wraparound services to families, we're helping dealing with some of the social ills or some of the things that impedes a student's progress. And we're doing this through this initiative, which is called Boots on the Ground, Students in the Seats. We're grateful to be partnering with Chicago Public Schools. We're having a great deal of success with getting students in the best position where they can be re-enrolled and re-engaged with the educational process. One of the things that we've discovered, and we want to talk a little bit tonight, is what is the real need to have this thing called an education? Because many people are pushed to it, many are convinced to go, many are coerced to go, many are threatened and intimidated. There's a whole lot of reasons why people are going to school. Many are going simply to learn because they understand the value of an education and what that value translates to in dollars and cents. And some of us are missing this reality. And so we have to ask ourselves, well, what is the real value of an education? And we look no further to try to define, if we could just simply define in a simple term, in an uncomplicated way, what is education? And education is that which gives the holder of the education something to work with, and it also gives someone else something to work with you on. Because many of us, and many times, you'll see that if you don't have nothing or anything to work with, how can you then present something for somebody to work with you on? That's our struggle. That's what we go back and forth with in many situations, trying to find jobs, trying to ascertain credit, trying to buy a home, or whatever the case may be. We don't have anything to work with. Education gives you something to work with. So education is simply a tool. And this tool is supposed to help with the development of the mind. And once this tool called education is used to develop the mind, then this mind that has been developed should be able to solve its own personal and social problems. Anything more complicated than that is probably not education. Because in its simplest form and in its purest reality, every American citizen, every being on this planet would like to be able to solve two problems: their own personal problems, and then turn around and work with some of the social problems of the day. You cannot do that void of education. You cannot do that void of having something to work with. You cannot do that with less than a developed mind of some capacity that allows you to be what you were created to be. And so we ask the question to any viewing audience: are you a tool or are you a toy? Are you something to work with or something to play with? Where do you stand when it comes to education? You know, we hear so much about the fiscal cliff, and we hear so much about the different politicos and what they're doing. They're doing this. All that stuff is fine and well. But the bottom line is, when we get through with all of the chatter, what do you have to work with? And if the question is inferior to the answer that it should be, then now we deal with the reality of who's playing with you. And let me try to illustrate that in a very simple way. There is no way that anyone can survive off meager wages, of less than what they need to care for themselves. In a nutshell, let's say you're dealing with a budget, because I'll start education off in the area of money. Let's say you're dealing with money and you need somewhere to live. And let's say that you are planning to move and to get somewhere to live, the things that you would need to be comfortable in that space and what have you. And you're planning. And you start planning and you realize that 25 to 30% of your income is going towards your rent or going towards your mortgage, because it's standard operating procedures that about 25 to 30% of what you make of your income, and that's it, should be relegated towards your rent or your mortgage. But let's say you're making money and your income is indicative of someone who is paying 50% of their income toward their rent. So now you have to live out. So now everything else in your life has to be taken out of the 50% that left. Okay. If we look closely at these realities, yeah, there are some people who are living above their means, but there are also, when you see these are indicators. When people are paying an inordinate amount of rent, then we can start looking at their education, and we can find out that the real estate business and we can find out that the housing business plays games with you, because they know that you're now out of your comfort zone when it comes to money, that you don't have any wealth, that you're trying to live as best you can, and as best you can is living in an environment that produces nothing. And let me give an illustration. It doesn't cost that much money, that much different to live in Inglewood or the South Loop. The difference in what it costs to live in these two communities is not that great. But when you don't make enough money, or your debt to ratio is not right, or if you don't have the education that you need, you can't live in certain areas. And we would like to say that we've been boxed out, or we can't do this, or we can't. No, let's look at it another way. The less education you have, the less ability to earn. The less you earn, the less options you have. The less options you have, the more transitional you will be, because you will be constantly moving around, trying to find something that would allow you to live comfortably, but you can't live comfortably because you don't have the things in place. And in America, there's one thing that you have to have in place. It has to work for you. And I would pray that the viewing audience listen to me very carefully. Without an education in America, you might as well be dead. Without an education in America, you might as well be dead. And before we sit around and watch our children expire, many of us need to start working in the interest of making sure that our children are not pawns to play with, but our children have something to work with. And we have to keep backing this thing up until we take education seriously as parents, as adults, as caregivers, as guardians of our children. We're going to have to go back to the drawing board and look at education as the sole tool that gets you from poverty, that gets you from despair, that gets you from less than, that gets you from the have-nots into the mainstream of society. That's real. And until we get it, nobody's going anywhere without it. You cannot excel in America educationless. Let me take this further. I'm going to try to tie in what I just said. Inferior housing, inferior foods, inferior clothing. But we spend more of our resources on things to make us look good and make us feel good, and we spend less hours trying to do good. This is the problem. When you look at a large percentage of our young people are not going to school. A large percentage of our young people are on the streets. They don't have the education that they need. In this country, if you have a GED, it is research bears witness and the data bears witness that if you have a GED and you are in America, chances are you're going to only earn about $524,000, $550,000 across the span of your life. Now, if you think that's a lot of money, I beg to differ and I disagree. We're talking about over your lifespan from 19 to 64, a period of 45 years. In 45 years with a GED in America, you will make $524,000. That's equivalent to $12,000 a year. And it might be a few more thousand, but when you pay taxes, that dissipates to about $12,000 a year. So from the time I'm 19, and at 19, a 19-year-old could live pretty good with $12,000. He's still at home with his parents, probably, still in school, may not have a lot of bad habits, just want a car and whatever else teenagers want. But a 40-year-old man making $12,000 a year, no, that won't cut it. 20 years have passed, and he's still at the same salary level. Imagine having a job where you max out your hourly rate at $10 an hour in the first couple of years that you've been on the job. That is absolutely insane. But until you go and add something to your education, you can't even get to the next level of income. You can't get to it because the way the systems are set up, the way the workforces are set, the way the unions are operated, the way this diverse system is set up, this complicated system is set up, the only key to unlock this system is education. The only key to unlock it. If you have an associate's degree, that thing kicks up to about $800,000 over the course of a person's life. You know, these numbers are just amazing. So can you imagine living on Earth for 65 years, and the most money you make while you on Earth is 18 grand because you won't go to school? The schools don't close because you get 40. The schools don't close when you 41. They never close. And we never think about bettering our situations, bettering our conditions, bettering our ability to live, and as we age and to get to our golden years, to live comfortably. We never think about it because we have surrendered ourselves as play toys. And all we looking for is a playground and a playmate. So if that's all we're looking for, that's all you're going to get. You know, so now in being played with, I play with Social Security. I play with unemployment. I play with my taxes. There's so many people finna play with their taxes in the next 2 to 3 weeks. You know, we do all this stuff, and it still leaves us stuck in poverty. It still find ourselves steep in debt, and nothing changes because we don't have anything to work with, and we don't have anybody around us that can develop those work habits and those work skills that we need, that teaches us the things that we need to teach. Our children have to get this. Viewing audience, my name is Minister Johnny Banks. I need somebody to call in and comment on why is it so important to have an education. And we can say all the beautiful things we want to. You can put as many pieces of paper up on that wall if you want to. But the bottom line is those pieces of paper have great value when it comes to you being able to develop what you need for yourself, develop what you need for others. That is real. And so those of us who don't want to struggle, who don't want to work through it, who don't want to make the sacrifice on the front end, will find ourselves struggling and burn out in the middle and on the back end, because education is the one tool that when it is used properly, when the mind is developed because of it, it would allow you to solve your own personal and social problems. If a human being is unemployed, that is not anybody's fault but the human being. That's called a personal problem. If the human is not capable of solving that personal problem, then that human will become a social problem. Social problems generally wind up on welfare. Social problems generally wind up in jail. Social problems wind up on drugs. Social problems wind up having too many children that they can't take care of. They become social problems. And nobody wants to just tell it like it is. And we're saying we don't have to do that. That's why we're in the streets. That's why we're saying the Boots on the Ground initiative works, because it gets young people off the streets, back into school, re-enroll, getting back into the educational process, and we are constantly working with them, mentoring them, monitoring them, and advocating for those things that they need to stay into the mainstream of life. All of us need something like that, whether it's family, and the thing that's so interesting, just to mention family. You say now, if education is so important, how do you acquire it? Through family. Through family. And if you look at, by and large, the large percentage of the population of America has had family as the driving force that was supportive of and the backbone of their education. That is it. That is all. You must have family, because family in its most simplistic form is the natural order of life. It does a couple of things. It nurtures and educates individuals and children to be what they were created to be. A young man's mind has to be nurtured. A young man's mind has to be in a position for somebody to put education into it. Education is developed. It started at home. It is developed at home, and then it is broadened in the public sector called the school system. The school system does not initiate education. The school system does not develop it. The school system broadens it. So we have many of our young people who are coming into the school system depending on the school system to activate something and work with them with something that should have been done prior to them showing up at the school door. And then we see time and time again the struggle of our children, the struggle of the dissipation of our communities, the hardships that we encounter because people are not educated. They're not educated where they can be competitive in global markets. They're not educated where they can be competitive on the state level, on a local level. They're not educated where they can compete for jobs. They can compete to provide services. They can compete to get what they need to develop business. They can compete what they need to have health and health laws and health conditions made available in their own households and communities. Education allows you to go and acquire what you need, to get what you need. Education, after supplying all your needs, there should be enough overflow for you to also obtain some of the things that you want. My name is Minister Johnny Banks. We're talking about why is education in such a need? Why is it in such dire straits? Why is it one of the things that has to occur for you to go and be what you need to be and develop some of the things that you need to develop in your life? We talked a little bit earlier about, are you a tool or are you a toy? Without education, you're going to have to wind up in a situation where you are something to play with, but you don't have the necessary things you need to work with. Are you a tool or are you a toy? Can you get in and start to work on a future that's worth living by simply understanding how things work? Because if you don't know what something is and why something is, you will never know how it works. Education teaches you what something is, why something is, and how does this something work? And until we understand that, how things work, until we understand that we need this education gives us something to work, then we will always be playing. Always. We will never get a fair shot on any level, on anything. And to give you a somewhat sad and poignant illustration. If you obtain a bachelor's degree. Just a bachelor's degree. Go to college for 4 years. And I need everybody to listen to me very carefully. Over the span of your life, you'll make well over $2 million. Which means that at 19 and 20, you'll be going in and being able to qualify for employment, qualify for careers, qualify for opportunities that are starting you in the middle to in the mid to high 30s, maybe even the low $40,000 a year. For a young man or a young lady who's single, who doesn't have any children, who may have acquired some debt, and in America you're going to acquire some debt to go to school, and all you have to do is then start paying down your debt. It's reasonable to assume that this person could ascertain some wealth if they really took their education seriously and learned how to make the money work for them. And instead of them using, use the money, make the money work for you. And so that's all the way from 12,000 with a GED that has been tripled almost 4 times with a bachelor's. And I know many people will refute those numbers, but the numbers don't lie. They are what they are. Yes, things have changed. Yeah, we have a different workforce, but education has not changed. The need for education, matter of fact, has grown exponentially. Where you have to have a certain amount of education to go anywhere, and ascertain any type of work. You must have some degree of education to get it now. So I'm just encouraging the viewing audience, if anybody's listening, work on your education. If any young people are watching this show tonight, take your education seriously. For any parents who are watching this show, you have a responsibility to see that your children are educated. The war is a war not just on poverty, but poverty that's based and laced with ignorance. There's been many people have been poor. As a matter of fact, African American people come from a culture of being poor. Many of us know what it's like, but many of us know what it's like to overcome that as well. To suck up the reality and put in some real work. It has not changed from the time we've been on the planet to the time we've inhabited America. It still has not changed. We're still going to have to suck it up. Doesn't matter what color you are, what type of melanin, or how rich the melanin in your skin is. We're going to have to suck this thing up, and we're going to have to put some work in. Or you're going to wind up dying as somebody who's been played with for over the span of your entire life. And who wants to spend all their life being played with? You vote, your vote don't count. You buy a home, somebody swindle you out of the home. Your children don't want to go to school, you go along with it. You buy cars and they charge you 30% interest on the car. We go and we need a couple dollars, instead of going to a bank and sign a piece of paper with a 3 to 5% interest rate, we go to payday loans and get a 600% interest rate, and we think this is okay because we have allowed people to start playing with us. It is unconstitutional and against the law for somebody to take out a $1,000 loan and have to pay $6,000 back, unless you are part of those people who want to be played with. It is absolutely insane. My name is Minister Johnny Banks. I'm the Executive Director of A Knock at Midnight. I always want to just come on the show, and every now and then I just need to talk about something that's really deep in my heart, something that touches me deeply, which is the lack of education of our youth, the seemingly unconcern or disconnectedness of the adults that can make the decisions to give each youth a chance to get back in school, to re-enroll, to re-engage, and re-enter the school, a school, whether an alternative school or a Chicago public school, whatever school, get back in and then reconnect and get back on track to doing what you need to do with yourself, to having a life that's worth living. Because like I said earlier in the show, and I'll say it again, living in America without an education, you might as well be dead. There's nothing happening, nothing is going on. Listen, my name is Minister Banks. Our show goes very fast. As a matter of fact, our time is up. I appreciate anybody who may have listened. I can be reached at 773-488-2960. Remember, in the darkest hour, truth and knowledge are the way. A good night, and God bless you.